we should wait to get excited about the new threads. That's because at about the same time, rumblings surfaced about trade talks between the Browns and Vikings for Beckham, first from a tweet by Mark Malusis of WFAN, then from Colin Cowherd on FS1, who says Beckham wants out. Now, behind the scenes, the Browns were telling reporters at ESPN in Cleveland that the notion is false. Still, it did create a fair amount of buzz, Max. If true, would Beckham make the Vikings a legit Super Bowl threat?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, first of all, I have to say, I think they are Super Bowl contenders and were last year fringy kind of contenders. And normally, a wideout does not really move the odds much for a team. If you look at Vegas posting odds over-under for wins and stuff like that, quarterbacks, yes, wideouts, not so much. But Beckham has been special when he's been at his best, which has not been for a couple of years now. You'd think he's highly motivated. He can't, have a bad showing 3 consecutive years on 3 consecutive teams. He's in his physical prime. He is replacing an excellent receiver that the Vikings lost, but Beckham is a better receiver. And the Vikings last season, look, if you beat the Saints in the playoffs, are you a Super Bowl contender? I think so, and they just did it. And they got stopped by the team in the NFC, the Niners, who eventually represented, them in the Super Bowl. And by the way, had a lead in the fourth quarter. So yeah, I think the Vikings are already kind of knocking on the door, and Odell Beckham Jr. would tick that up a notch because Diggs is a very good receiver. Beckham's better. When Beckham's at his best, he's the most talented receiver in the world. And he's put up numbers at ages that really others have not. He was setting records until first he got hurt, and then the Giants were a mess, and then he got traded and the Browns were a mess. If he goes to a good, stable place with good pieces around him, guys, they lost close. Well, they lost 2 to the Packers and 2 to the Bears last year. Maybe Odell makes a difference. I think he likely does in at least a game or 2. And maybe the Vikings are challenging for a bye. He offers that kind of a premium when healthy. And he's never been in a really highly functional environment where, compared to where he's been recently, the Vikings certainly represent that.
Well, first of all, I disagree with you, even though it's very hard to when you bring up the word fringy. I mean, if that's your definition of a Super Bowl contender, I can name about 8 teams that qualify as Super Bowl contenders. I'm sorry, my definition of a Super Bowl contender, when you're talking about the Super Bowl picture, who are you looking at that you're really legitimately giving a bona fide chance to? The Vikings are not one of those teams. And, oh, by the way, Max, if they're going to be one of those teams, it ain't going to be because of Odell Beckham Jr. It's going to be because of Dalvin Cook. The Minnesota Vikings are as relevant as Dalvin Cook allows them to be. When he's healthy and on the field, that's the difference. Not without him. When I look at Odell Beckham Jr., to be specific, here's my thing. I really feel bad for having this discussion, Max, because I believe in the brother just like you do. I don't believe it was his fault in New York. I don't believe it was his fault in Cleveland. It ain't his damn fault. To me, this is an indictment against Baker Mayfield, whether he admits it or not. And it's also a lack of belief in the Browns organization. Now, you would think that with Kevin Stefanski coming there, that, this would be one of those situations where you could look at it and say, okay, let me give the new coach a chance or whatever. If you're not willing to do so, it can only be one of 2 reasons. You don't believe in the organization or you don't believe in the quarterback. And I would go to quarterback because even when you got questions about the organization, they still ain't the dudes that you got to go out of the field and play with. And when you look at the talent on the Cleveland Browns, Jarvis Landry, Njoku's there. Obviously, they picked up another tight end. You got Chubb in the backfield, Kareem Hunt still, if he's still there. You got all of that going on, okay? But Baker Mayfield's your quarterback. If you believe in Baker Mayfield, I don't think it's a situation where you want to leave Cleveland unless Odell Beckham Jr. is so shallow that being in a market like Cleveland ain't going to do anything for him. And I think in this day and age with the advent of social media and beyond, I don't think his marketability is hurt because he's in the city of Cleveland. I think his marketability is hurt because he's a Brown. We certainly can't say his marketability is hurt by being in Cleveland because Baker Mayfield had more commercials for Progressive than he ended up having wins. So when you look at it from that perspective, you can definitely get your shine being a member of the Cleveland Browns. If you won, okay, but that wasn't the case. I think this is an indictment against Baker Mayfield if there's any truth to Odell Beckham Jr. wanting out of Cleveland, and I'm not going to point the finger at him in any regard. I know he can ball. I know he's an elite receiver. I know if I'm in a situation with a big-time quarterback, he could do some things. But when I look at Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings, the only reason I'd give them remotely a chance is Dalvin Cook. And I think come playoff time, Dalvin Cook, unfortunately, has shown that he can be neutralized because they will dare Kirk Cousins to beat them instead of Dalvin Cook. And Kirk Cousins hasn't shown us the ability to do that.
Well, Dalvin Cook is a beast. No question about it. And yes, he's the guy who makes that offense go. And Dalvin Cook is a special running back. You know, you see a lot of excellent, talented running backs, and then there's some guys who are different. And I think Dalvin Cook is differently excellent. Like, he's really an elite guy. And you pair him not only with Odell, but Thielen. Like, you at a certain point, the weapons, you know, we talk about triplets a lot or quadruplets in the case of Kansas City when Kareem Hunt was there, although Damian Williams had an excellent Super Bowl. But, you know, like, oh, my God, they got the tight end, they have the receiver, they have the quarterback, they have the running back. But, damn, you have a couple of #1 receivers like that with a running back like that and a quarterback who seemed to get the monkey off his back in the playoffs last year and finally win. That is different, Stephen A. That's not like, you know, you hear a lot of tandems in football where you have two receivers and they're both #1s. But then they're, you know, like how many times in the history of football have there been two elite #1 receivers? Even when you look at the salad days of the Pittsburgh Steelers, you had Hines Ward and Plexico Burress. But as an overall receiver, yeah, Hines Ward. But when you talk about catching the ball, oh, my God, Thielen and Odell with a back like that, it's like, you know, if everyone stays healthy, that's historically good.
I'm not trying to imply that Kirk Cousins is some scrub that can't play. I know the man can play. But there's something missing, particularly in big moments. And the bottom line is Odell Beckham Jr. with Saquon Barkley was not a bad deal at all. But did that help Eli Manning? Not that much, because he was pretty much done. I'm not saying that Kirk Cousins is to that point. I'm simply saying that when it gets tight and playoff time arrives, you're going to press Kirk Cousins to be the guy that beats you. And I have to see that to believe that.
All right, fair enough. Gentlemen, when we come back, we're going to have Jags superstar Leonard Fournette, and he thinks there's something missing on his Jag squad. He had a real interesting tweet last night. We are going to ask him about that and so much more. Don't go anywhere. Leonard Fournette next on First Take.
I know this is not a popular stance, so be it.
If you zip it right now, you'd have got your feelings hurt.
He's being sensitive. It's so comically bad.
I mean, damn! He dissed him, man!